Hi, everybody. Welcome to the June edition of the Kubernetes Monitoring Helm chart office hours. I'm Pete Wall, one of the engineers that's building the Kubernetes Monitoring Helm chart, and we'll talk about what we're going to do today. I want to talk a little bit about what's been happening with the 4.1 release, what will be coming up in the 4.2 release. We'll talk about the deprecation of V1 and V2, and we'll leave time for questions and answers. K8s Monitoring 4.1, we've had this release out for a little while. Since the last office hours, the biggest changes have happened in three different patch releases. You can look at the release notes if you want to see all of the different updates there. But the kind of the summary of the biggish ones that you might want to be aware of is that for the cost metrics features, we added further improvements to how we do the config handling. Um, the story behind this one is that the way that open cost, which is the component that we deploy to get cost metrics, the way that that works is for certain features, it wants to use a config file. And for other features, it does not use this config file. And so we're trying to deploy this in a way that is the most portable for all of the different platforms. Specifically important is the GKE platform, where you do need, or it wants to have an API signing key. So I think we finally nailed down the most flexible and portable way of deploying OpenCost without having to require a lot of manual innovation. Please give it a shot. I've known we've got some people who are using this, and we've come to things that I think will fix things for them really well. OTLP destination, we've added timeouts to that. So if you want to further tune how your OTLP destination works, there's a timeout feature there. We've made a lot of different improvements to the different validators that are inside of the Helm charts. Controlling the different behavior for if you're using things like the cluster metric feature and you've got kubestate metrics node exporter that are already on a cluster, we're doing smarter ways of finding those dependencies, guiding you through those dependencies. Things like the platform validation and verification, if you're on different platforms, we're doing better things with the validators there. So a lot of things are maybe more behind the scenes. But for people who are building their Helm chart values file, it should be even better experience. Obviously, we always include the latest dependencies for our Helm charts. So for Node Exporter, kubestate metrics, Windows Exporter, OpenCost, Kepler, and Grafana Bela and Grafana Alloy, we're always trying to keep those as up to date as possible. And then other minor bug fixes. Um, Later today, we'll probably be releasing 4.1.7. And the biggest cool thing that's coming with that is that we are looking into doing Helm chart signing and verification. So the Helm charts that we publish to our Helm chart repository will be signed by a GPG key, so you can verify those. And just better supply chain security. We're incorporating a lot of that into our own Helm chart building. So the dependencies that we pull will also be checking and verifying. And so then the Helm chart that we publish to you, you can also verify if you'd like, but just rest assured that, we're trying to offer the best security footprint as possible for that. For case monitoring Helm chart 4.2, I've been talking about this upcoming feature release for a little while. Honestly, it's slowed this past week because we were working on the Helm chart signing and verification piece of it. But we're pretty close to finishing up all of the planned features here. The last one that I need to merge in is the EC2 enrichment. The short story about what that means is that if you are running on like an EKS cluster with EC2 nodes, if you have tags on those EC2 nodes, we can pull those tags and add them as labels or attributes to your metrics, logs, traces, profiles. I just finished merging in the Kubernetes enrichment a couple weeks back, and that has a similar story around namespace labels and things like that. And so I think this will be really useful for people who are running on EKS. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to do the same thing for things like GKE and other platforms as well. The cert manager inclusion, actually, that's old news. We're not doing that. So just ignore that that's on there. I forgot that that was on the slide. So that we have determined that we do not need. So the nice story there is that there's not going to be an additional dependency. It's going to be handled solely by the Bela deployment. And so we don't have to worry about cert manager. Deprecation notice. So this happened back on June 1st. We officially deprecated versions 1 and versions 2. If you are running on either of those versions, I highly recommend that you upgrade. Either upgrade to version 3 or 4. Version 4 is getting all of the new features and will get faster turnaround for feature releases. We will deprecate version 3 at some point, so it's probably best to move on to version 4. There's no date for version 3 deprecation at this point. If I had to guess, it wouldn't be until, way later into the fall. But that's not a promise, that's not a guarantee. That's just kind of like I'm trying to work towards a future where we're only maintaining one major version at a time, just for sustainability. But I don't have a date plan for that at this point. But versions 1 and 2 have been officially deprecated. We will not be cutting new dependency update releases for that. So please do plan to upgrade to version 3 or version 4. Both V3 and V4, there will be changes to the values file. If you're coming from V1, so we do have the migration utility that will help you with that. If you're already on version 2, going to version 3 should be very simple. There should be very little changes to the values file that you'll have to make. Going from any of those to V4 will require some changes, but it should be fairly straightforward. So again, take a look at the values file or the migration utility. Take a look at our docs. We have some docs about what sort of things you need to change for migration. And that's really all the prepared content. Not a ton here. I did want to introduce Tyler. Tyler is a new joiner to Grafana Labs, and he is now an active contributor onto the Kubernetes Monitoring Helm chart. And so, Tyler, if you want to take a minute just to introduce yourself and yeah, anything else you want to say?
Yeah, hi, I'm Tyler Helmuth. I'm a new member on the Helm chart squad. Going to be working with Pete a lot on the Kubernetes monitoring Helm chart and more. Got a history in the observability space. I'm deep in open telemetry. I'm a maintainer of the open telemetry Helm charts and open telemetry collector, and I'm excited to be here at Grafana helping out.
Thanks, Tyler. Yeah, I'm extremely excited that Tyler's joined the team. There's a lot of really cool things that we've got planned long term, and I think that with Tyler joining, we'll be able to really accelerate towards that. So thank you. All right, open Q&A time. We've got a number of people who've joined the call, so if you have any questions, feel free to unmute and just ask away.
Yeah, I have a couple things actually. One pretty simple. I may have just missed it. When is the ease of fleet management feature coming? It was mentioned in another meeting a while back,
Yeah.
like a kind of a big target time, but I don't remember. And
Right. Okay, so fleet management, we've had support for deploying Alloy instances to
yeah,
use fleet management for a long time. I would say actually with V4, it's getting even easier because you're able to deploy your Alloy instances in different topologies, different formats. Makes it a lot closer to how people who want to use the k8s monitoring Helm chart, you get a lot more customization in how you deploy Alloy. And so it makes it simpler to integrate that with fleet management. We are actively working with the fleet management and instrumentation hub teams to make that whole process a lot smoother. Um,
okay.
as of today, you still have kind of the notion of local configuration, which like the features within the k8s monitoring Helm chart are all going to be deployed locally into config maps on the Kubernetes cluster. You then have also the remote configuration that gets defined inside of Fleet Management and Instrumentation Hub, and those they don't coordinate with each other at this point. Um, it's still on our roadmap to see if there's a way to do a really intuitive way of defining once and having it apply in both places or something like that. So the the long story, the answer to your question is, we don't have a thing that says can define it in like the values file and it pushes into fleet management. And it's not to say that we couldn't do that, but what I really want to stress is that we're looking for a solution that kind of makes both experiences feel really comfortable, really intuitive. Um, And also, you don't have to deal with a lot of strange synchronization issues. If you change something on the Helm side, does it force a change on the Fleet side? If you change on Fleet, are you out of sync with what you deployed?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the ability to just connect to fleet management, totally done. But it's that kind of synchronization and understanding of what's local config versus what's remote config. I do admit we've got some work to do there, but we have some ideas and we have some plans. And internally, we have some things going forward that I think is going to help also accelerate the process of getting
Very
there.
cool. Cool. Very cool. Yeah, I just have a one client in particular where more often now we are updating the Alloy config with, just like bespoke configurations,
Yep.
maybe even per cluster. Like
Right.
this cluster needs this, but these don't. So things like that. So it's getting
Right.
more and more of an issue, but it's not really yet. But
Yeah.
yeah, someday that will really help out. But this
No.
client for sure.
Totally agree. I mean, I think that the benefit of like the k8s monitoring Helm chart is it fits really well into customers that are using GitOps type things. They're doing
Yeah.
things that are like cluster specific. And also, I've always said that one of the benefits, I love Alloy, like, and then the Alloy config language is fine, right? Right. But we never asked our users to become experts in Alloy, and I feel like that's something that we're looking forward to bringing that experience up into fleet management as well. Like, how can we just, and I think that's what Instrumentation Hub really is trying to do too. So,
Oh,
how can
great.
we get users to just say, I just want to tell you what I want to instrument, and we can just deploy the config and get it going. So I think there's a bright future for a lot of that. It's just, we're working on it. So,
Well, that's good to hear. That's
yeah,
great. That's great.
no,
Uh,
good question,
the
Stephen. What
Yeah, the
else?
other thing I have is maybe just my naivety of how this works.
Yeah,
Log deduplication. So when you're using pod logs and OTel logs, so the same
sure.
client, we've got pod logs turned on for everything, and we're getting the logs coming in. Great, awesome. And then little by little, app teams are instrumenting their apps. And so now we're getting OTel telemetry data. I know that it's not one-to-one pod logs to OTel logs, but there's some duplication that happens.
Hmm.
Is there some like best practice way to handle that? Or I just haven't really dove into that. I mean,
Yeah.
just to show where my naivety level just increased, I thought OTel logs and pod logs were the same. So just today, I learned that no, they're not. There's different logs that come in for OTel than pod logs, but there is a crossover somewhere.
Right.
So now I'm just like, do people handle that? Is there like a way that people go and handle that? Is that a thing or?
Yeah, solid question, and totally like a path that I think a lot of people could find themselves in, right? If you're instrumenting your applications, you're sending the log data through the open telemetry,
Yeah,
and you're also getting the pod logs. I mean,
yeah,
the reason why that's hard to detect is because they're coming through two different, feature paths, right?
right,
Um, what you really need to do is, find out which ones are coming from one place and then just turn off the alternate one or filter out amount. Um, Tyler, I'm kind of curious from the open telemetry side of things. This is a similar issue that we would see from people using upstream open telemetry charts. Do you know of patterns or of best practices that people have recommended from that side of things?
Yeah, so like a lot of things in Kubernetes, everyone's getting the data from the same place, whether that's metrics from the kubelet or logs just off of our pod logs. Um, it's not the different scrapers have different ways that they're messing with the data, but at the end of the day, the data is all the same from the same source. So in these situations, we've just got to decide which pipeline do we want to scrape the data from? Do we want to scrape it with the OpenTelemetry file log receiver, or do we want to scrape it with Loki, or do we want to scrape it from some other thing? And try not to duplicate that data.
Mm.
okay. So if I said, okay, we're gonna only use OTel to scrape that data, I could get the full set of what's like there's some logs coming in through pod logs that aren't coming in through OTel. I could scrape that whole set with just the with Otel.
Yeah, so OpenTelemetry, the OpenTelemetry collector or the file log receiver that's
Okay.
embedded in Alloy or an OpenTelemetry collector is capable of scraping all the logs from VAR-pod logs.
Mhm.
If there's a log that's missing or it feels like there's a log that's not present when it's scraped from the OpenTelemetry component versus Loki, for example, we'd have to look
Mhm.
at that specific case to
Okay.
figure out if that log really is coming from VAR log pods or if it's like a Kubernetes event being
Right.
transformed into a Loki log or something. But all the source of the data is Kubernetes and
Yeah.
OpenTelemetry or Loki um, or some other source of data that can be converted to OTLP. They're all grabbing from the same data and we can get it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to hear. Their biggest thing with logs is trace correlation. So
Yep.
the OTel log is more important than the pod log.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess I do want to clarify there's when we say OTel log, there's this other concept where um, an application could be producing a log, and a traditional style might be like, well, we'll just write that to standard out, and it'll end up in varpod logs, and therefore we can scrape it with whatever's listening in varpod logs.
Yeah.
But if they're using the OpenTelemetry SDK in their application, they can produce a trace, and they can export that trace wherever they want, such as an Alloy endpoint or an OpenTelemetry collector that sends to Grafana. They can also produce a log
Mhm.
from that OTel SDK, and that would
Yeah.
get written to wherever they export. That would not go to varpod log. So that can be collected by an Alloy. That can be collected from OpenTelemetry collector. That is also a way to produce application logs from a Kubernetes container.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And
Yeah. Go
so
ahead.
if I'm reading what you're kind of asking about is that if you have applications that are doing that, right, where they're
Yeah.
sending logs using like they're pushing logs through the OTLP connection and they're logging it to standard out so it's getting picked up by the file system log reader,
Yeah,
probably the recommendation that I would go is, if there's clean, consistent ways to identify those specific application pods, you could just do something to omit those from the pod logs feature and just use the OTLP push. There's a bunch of trade-offs when you do the OTLP push versus like the pod logs file system read. The advantage of the file system is that it's more persistent to restarts and things like that because it's on the file system, right? It's on the node.
Yeah.
Um, it's more tolerant of buffering and things like that. It doesn't have any concerns of interruption in network. Um, like you said, the benefit of the OTLP push is that a lot of the open telemetry attributes that are being set by the SDK that help out with the correlation with traces are going to be
Yeah.
there too. So,
Yeah.
I think that your mileage may vary. You got to pick which one works the best for your
Yeah.
solution. Obviously, we don't want to see duplication because that's just, wasting space and money.
Yeah.
And so filtering those out from the pod logs feature, you can do that before you even scrape the log files too. Um,
Yeah. I was gonna do so. My first test is going to just be exclude namespace. All
okay,
the
yeah,
apps are in particular namespaces, and there's nothing else in the namespace but the
right.
app.
Okay.
So I was gonna try that just to see if they get because they app teams they do look for very specific things. They actually have their own hotel log format that they've
Oh,
made. Yeah. So that's primarily what they're looking for. They're requiring app teams to conform to this format and emit via an OTel. So I think that may work. But I've seen recently just doing troubleshooting, it's like, well, these logs aren't coming through OTel. So that's probably something they can just push back onto the app team and say, look, if you
sure.
want it's supposed to come through Otel.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
A few things. Did I share my whole screen? Are y'all seeing the GitHub now? I just want
Yeah,
to.
yeah.
Okay. So we have in the Kubernetes Monitoring Helm chart source repository, we have a ton of examples. And the one that I want to share with you is this exclude by namespace example. So in down here, there we go, pod logs via Loki. So this would be the like the file system scraping feature. There is an exclude by namespace. So you could just drop in the application namespace where that is, and then we'll just by default just skip every pod that's coming out of that namespace. That's kind of a bulk way to do that.
Yeah.
There is an annotation that you can set on those pods. And so if you
Oh,
want something a little bit more surgical, you can set a specific annotation on the pod that says basically skip logs from this pod
oh,
in
yes.
particular. Um,
That'd be way better because then we can put that on the app team. So like, hey,
yeah.
app team, you need to annotate your pod.
I just brought this over here because I want to make sure I can find
That's fine.
that
That's fine.
annotation
I
for
get
it.
it. Yeah.
I want to call
It's
out while Pete's looking for that there's also like the OTLP SDK supports like console output. So if you want to generate the data using OTLP in an OTLP format with maybe attributes and a body and all the nice things that come along, trace
Hmm.
correlation, and all that stuff, you can write the file to barlog pods from the Otel SDK, and then you can continue to scrape barlog pods, and the data will have all of that context. You might have to do in that scraping, you'll probably have to tell the scraper, hey, this is the information that in this format. And it sounds like they have a custom format. So there might be a little bit of extra work on the scraper, but you can get the OTLP format written to barlog pods if you don't
Ah,
want to have
okay.
to push it.
Cool. Okay.
Yep. And then just to close the loop on that one, this is the annotation selector. So if you, by default, we discover all pods, and then you can use this annotation set to false, and then we will skip that pod. Um, for the sake of just, talking about what we can do here, in that pod logs feature, you could change the discovery method to annotation. So then this becomes an opt-in annotation rather than an opt-out annotation. But yeah, you could have the application developers set this as an annotation on their pod. And if this goes to false, then we'll skip doing the file system log read for those pods. So
Very cool.
a bunch of different options that you can explore.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. This gives me a lot to work with. I appreciate it. Well, thanks, Tyler. Thanks, Pete.
Hmm. Yeah. Any other questions? Great. Cool. All right. So thank you for joining the office hours. Really appreciate it. As always, we really drive a lot of this off of community feedback, feature requests, issues, anything that you have. It's always important that we make the Kubernetes monitoring Helm chart is really meant to be something that's easy to use and hopefully intuitive and helps people get their job done. So we really do drive this a lot on feedback. So the best way to let us know what you like or what you'd like to see improved is either on the Kubernetes channel in the Grafana community Slack, that's grafana.slack.com, or opening issues or opening pull requests into our source repository at grafana/k8s-monitoring-helm. But I appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining again, and we will see you next month in the K8s Monitoring Helm Chart office hours. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.